hello again. After the last video was edited and spliced and notated and processed and uploaded, I went and walked around for a bit, did a couple of stretches, did a couple of exercises, and got some wind in my hair, literally. And I feel a lot more awake now, and so I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of the Q&A that I have for the moment. This so that I'm caught up to now, literally, because I have a few questions that I received from the past couple days in response to the videos I've been posting for the past couple of days. So I'm going to just go through these, and depending on the time, I might be doing something else. So we'll see how this works. Alright, now I wanted to add something really quick. A gentleman was commenting on an allergen where the individual couldn't eat bread in a specific manner unless it was prepared in a specific manner, and you're right, there are much worse allergies to have than chocolate. In fact, my mother has one of those. She's allergic to gluten, and if you don't know what gluten is, then yeah, it's basically in just about everything. It's almost more difficult to go without than nuts, as far as allergens go. So I do definitely sympathize with that, and I do understand that, and I understand that I am technically fortunate in that I am only allergic to chocolate. But moving on, first question I receive. Do I think that the Alien universe, that's the Alien film franchise, and the books and the extended universe, could be adapted to an RPG, and what do I think about horror RPGs or horror games in general? Now, I personally am not a huge fan of the Aliens universe, but I will say that I did like both Alien and Aliens as movies, especially since they did something different. They both took the same concept and showed different sides of it, showed different aspects of it, really went in different directions there, and both did it fairly well, I thought. As far as the video game format, most things tend to go for the FPS route, and you can do that with an Aliens game. In fact, I think you can do that very well. But either if you do it as that, or if you do it in a more or less RPG setting, what I think you should do is the reverse RPG element, which is something you almost never see nowadays, ever. The reverse RPG starts you. Let's take Aliens specifically, right? And let's take maybe not an RPG per se, but let's just go ahead and say it's a shooter. Actually, let's go ahead and say it's like a shooter with like squad and a little bit of RPG element, right? You start out at your maximum power level, basically. You're fully equipped. You've got all the gear. You've got all your squad. All your squad mates are there. You've got all the ammunition. You go in. Now, here's the catch. Here's what makes it the reverse RPG. Rather than going up in power, gaining levels, gaining new weapons, that sort of thing, it does the exact opposite of that. This is an idea that has been talked about a lot, but again, you almost never see ever. In fact, I can't even think of an example off the top of my head of this. It would have been an older game if it was anything. One of the older adventure games, probably, from the early 90s. But, so let's just take this example I just said, Aliens, right? You start off with all the ammunition, all your squad group. You go through, and let's say you're basically mowing through things, but you're trying to be careful with your ammunition because you have no reloads on your ammunition. It just doesn't exist until you get to a certain point, and then the game throws a meat wall at you, a boss. And this boss basically forces you to either be very good, in order to get through it without really losing thing, blow a significant portion of ammunition on it to keep your squad mates alive and get them down, or to basically let one of your squad mates die in order to salvage your ammunition and be ready for the future. But no matter what happens, your overall power has just shrunk a bit, and continuing to do that, so the game is certainly increasing in difficulty as you go, but it's increasing because you are getting weaker, whereas the enemies are staying static the whole time. That type of gameplay is very well suited to the Aliens universe and to a horror setting in general because it's that gameplay story integration thing going on again. You literally are getting weaker as the game goes on, and so the tension and the fear and the horror and the oh my god, the excitement of the game increases as you're going through, assuming you're into that sort of thing, because of how much more difficult and how much less you're going on with. It literally becomes a bit of a survivalist horror thing because you just start to run out. And I think that would be very interesting if they did a proper Aliens game like that, either an FPS, as advertised, or an actual RPG element with the whole squad and whatnot. That would be awesome if they did that. But let's move on. Next question: what is my take on the 38 Studios Big Huge Games failure? That's actually an issue I've been trying to avoid because there seems to be a lot of drama involved in it. But let's be honest with ourselves. I am more on the developer side than I am the state's by a fair margin. And while the game studio did fail, they failed in such a normal and typical way that kind of happens to companies in general, let alone game developers. And I have a great deal of sympathy for them, and I do wish the state had gone with them and actually been able to give them. I forget the exact specifics, so forgive me, but from my understanding, the state and the governor did not give them the additional time in order to pay back the loan, so they seized assets, and that sucked, and I think that's terrible. And it's really a shame because, just to use the most immediate example, Kingdoms of Amalur was a great game, and they deserve better than that, and that's just such a shame. And so my hearts really go out to those people. I really wish I could do something about that, but you know, do I think it is becoming almost impossible to release a successful MMO due to the market saturation and the dominance of World of Warcraft? Yes, I do. I think that's been true for years at this point. I think that while it is possible, and it has been proven to be possible because MMOs do find their niche markets, but that's also how they've been doing it. MMOs have been finding the little niche market. This little area here, this chunk is the EVE Online players. This chunk is the FF11 players. This chunk is the Rift players. This chunk is the Lotro players, etc., etc., etc. And these little, they basically have to get their little spot that is profitable and gives them enough money to keep going and to keep making money in order to keep the servers up and keep the people employed every month, and be thankful that they got that much, because a lot of MMOs don't get that far. A lot of MMOs fail before they even reach that point. And you could say whatever you want about the World of Warcraft dominance. The saturation problem has been a problem for many years now. Even when World of Warcraft came out, the MMO market was starting to get saturated, and it is now much, much worse. And so, uh, I don't know if other people are the same way, but just speaking personally, I have started getting a lot pickier about MMOs simply because the saturation is so great. Not only can I afford to, but time is an issue. An MMO, by definition, is a time sink and something that requires you to really put your involvement into it, really devote yourself to. And I don't have the time to play 3 MMOs like I used to, and so I have to be pickier, if you follow me. So it really, I do wish well most aspiring MMO companies, but it's a huge risk to do nowadays, much more so than it ever has been. It's only been going up. So, next question. Are you a natural speed reader, or did you teach yourself via some sort of course or guidebook? Both, actually. I used to read very quickly, and what ended up happening, this is all I have present here, but you get to the thing where you start following the finger, and I guess you can't see me here. You just start doing this thing. There's no actual text here, so I can't actually demonstrate, and you learn how to track that and process it, and that's the real kick, is processing it quickly. So, both, I guess. Next question. M. What are my thoughts about? There's actually 2 people asked this, or rather, 2 questions were sent for this. What are your thoughts on the game that's coming out based on Cyberpunk that CPRED are working together with Mike Pondsmith? I'm really excited about that. I really do have high hopes for that. They're going for an open world, open freedom exploration game based on Cyberpunk, and since Mike himself is working with them, the odds are good that it's actually going to be true to the setting, and be really awesome if they pull it out for us. So I'm, high hopes there, and I know for sure that at least one of my friends is going to buy that, guaranteed, when it comes out, and I, at the very least, will be buying it, hopefully within the year that it comes out. Very looking forward to that. Are you excited about E3 in any respect, such as the games, technology coming out, etc.? Um, would you believe I haven't really been following E3 that much this year? And when I say that, what I mean is every time I look at E3 news, I look at news that just doesn't seem interesting to me. The Unreal 4 technology they're unveiling certainly looks cool. I'm into that. I'm very into that. That's all I got. Everything else that has been announced has been something that's just kind of like, okay. Now, if there's any surprise announcements, if there's anything that is actually going to be really cool, awesome. I'm looking forward to it. I will be doing, well, I don't know if I will be doing. I am thinking about doing a post E3 show to talk about my thoughts on what they announced and whether or not I think it's going to be anything or not. I don't know if there's a demand for that sort of thing, but I have had a request already for someone to do something like that. From someone to do something like that. But just to give you an example, Square Enix, I know I just keep picking on them, has announced they're going to do They're going to announce 2 games. One is a game that's been out for years in Japan, which does not look interesting and is on the phone, and the other is the Symphonia thing, which I'll completely admit, in my own guilty little way, does look amusing. But that is not. That's actually a flash game. That's not even a popcorn game. That's the kind of thing I'd play for a few hours and then put it down and never pick it up again. So not really that interested. And that's just kind of how it feels like as a whole this year. So we'll see. We'll see. Next question. Maybe it's just me, but I never see any Colonial games. Do you think there is a market for that type of genre? Why or why not? Now, I'm going to assume what this means is talking about the actual gameplay of colonizing, especially historical colonizing, such as when the many countries of Europe stretched out to Africa, to the North and the South Americas. And I do think that's an interesting gameplay. I have seen games do that, but not recently, not in like the last 8 years at least. That used to be one of the type of Civ type games they'd come out with, or the type of Total War strategic level games they'd come out with, ignoring the RTS element. And I found that type of gameplay fascinating. And one of the, give you another example here, Total War. I actually don't remember which Total War. One of the Total Wars had a whole game about that, about the colonial times, and the campaign for that was awesome. And actually expanding into the colonies was awesome. But I do think that that would be a very interesting game type of being the home country, whichever one you pick, whether it be fantasy or fictional or actually one of the ones from history, and colonizing the lands and setting up the trade routes and all that. That kind of thing interests me, and I think that would be a very good game type. It would probably be a niche type of game because that is a little bit more specific. It's taking strategy, narrowing it down to trade focused strategy, and then narrowing it down even more to resource management trade focused strategy. So it probably wouldn't be a huge market, but I do think there is a market for such a thing. Next question. What do you think of Lightning as a character? I'm assuming this is from Final Fantasy 13 because I can't think of another Lightning off the top of my head, but Lightning is the main protagonist, arguably, of Final Fantasy 13 for anyone who's wondering. I thought Lightning was a little bit trying too hard to be the tsundere, or however you pronounce that type of character. I know that's not actually accurate. I'm misusing that term, but what I mean is she was putting on a front too much, in my opinion. She had the mask on too much. I guess I could just say that rather than trying to use a term. She had the mask on too much, and I thought that while that was understandable to a certain extent, it took forever to actually get to see Lightning the character rather than Lightning the face. And I get that, but I would have preferred to actually see Lightning the character, the person, a lot sooner. Let me give you another example. Morrigan in Dragon Age wears that mask, but it slips constantly, and you keep getting hints, and you keep getting little glances of her until finally, if you romance her and deal with her properly, you actually get to see Morrigan the person. And you don't actually have to romance for that matter. As a female or as a non-romance male warden, you still get to become really close to her and become a true friend to her, and she'll be honest with you and open with you. That's how that kind of thing should be done. Lightning just now, I'm just kind of talking bad about her, but let's just be honest with ourselves. Lightning was an interesting protagonist, and I will say one thing very positive for Lightning. As I just mentioned in my previous Q&A, or maybe it was the second previous, one of the ones I've been doing this weekend, I personally have always been of the opinion that except for a few specific things, gender shouldn't matter, especially when it comes to characters in a story. The captain, not the female captain. Lightning was the protagonist. It was never the female protagonist, and I thought that was good. I thought that was excellent. I thought the fact that she was female was effectively irrelevant was good. And you could say whatever you want about the armor she's wearing. Out the window, don't care. As far as a character, as far as personality goes, her being female never was really emphasized, and I like that. So, moving on. What are your thoughts on Dawnguard for Skyrim, which I am really looking forward to? As I lose my tongue for a moment there. I was expecting this. A lot of my friends were expecting the war would be the first DLC. No, no, no. That's not how Bethesda does things. They always ramp up. The last DLC they punch out is always going to be the big, epic, oh my god one that really just is world altering and awesome. That's how they've done those things for years and years and years. So the war will probably be the last DLC they do. They probably will do a couple of ramp ups to that, and they'll have one or two random epic adventures. Just like Fallout 3 is the best example here. We've got, let's say, the Pit, and we've got Point Lookout. Both didn't really have much to do with the main plot overall. They were tangentially tied in, but they were still interesting, and they still had to carry their own flavor, and it was awesome. And Dawnguard seems very much be keeping the trend going. They're going for a completely different feel, a completely different atmosphere, from what I can see so far, of what Skyrim has been doing overall, and I imagine that that trend will continue. So high hopes, and I'm definitely buying that thing as soon as it comes out. Have I heard anyone talk about the incoming gaming crash? And if I have, do I think it could happen? Do I think it, if I think it could happen, how far away from this possible crash do you think we are? Now, let's be completely fair. I don't think a gaming crash is going to happen. I know what you're talking about, and I have discussed this. I don't think it's going to happen. As I've said in a previous video, I think we're actually on our way out of what has been a video game crash. I think we are now reaching for another golden age of video gaming, and I'm very excited for it. So, I don't think that's actually going to happen. And it's also worth noting that every time a major media crash has happened in the entertainment industry in the last 90 years, it has been relatively minor and only lasted a year or two at the most, and then immediately come right back out of it, because that's how backlash works. Because people don't know what balance is, so it just kind of does this thing, you know. And so while a crash might happen, I don't think it's going to. But if it does, all will happen. It'll go this, and it'll rebound right back up, just like it always has. And I'm not too concerned about it. Let's put it that way. Let's see. Have I ever played Deus Ex? This was referring to the original. Yes, of course I have. God, I love that game. Loved. I do have to say past tense, because Deus Ex is unfortunately one of those games that's in the category of doesn't age well. I've talked about this before, about how a game that is truly art, that is truly, amazing in all respects, is one that is still amazing 10 years later. Deus Ex is not in that list. It has not aged well. However, I will never degrade that game for its contributions to gaming as a whole, and the fact that it really was very enjoyable at the time. And if they ever did a proper remake of Deus Ex with a modern UI and modern graphics, I would buy that. Like that. It was an amazing game. And for any of you who can put up with the old UI and the old graphics and the old problems of older games, I do genuinely recommend you look into Deus Ex. If nothing else, try and go find one of those playthroughs on YouTube, a Let's Play or a non-narrated version or whatever, and just enjoy the story, because it was an amazing game. And it was one of the very few games that tried something new in that particular era. One of my favorite examples of this is the fact that you could, focus in whatever specialization you wanted to, you could do so, and it was viable. This is the key part. A lot of games give you the option of specializing in whatever, but in Deus Ex you could specialize whatever and it would work, and you could actually use that at all points in the game, and it was beautifully designed. Oh my goodness, it must have been a nightmare to craft, but very well done. And the fact that in some cases you could literally bypass bosses just amused me, but let's move on. Next question. What do I think about cross-genre games? And by that I mean FPS RPGs, adventure games, Deus Ex, Bioshock, etc. I think that's a good thing. Obviously, RPG is something that is very easy to cross with any other genre, as it indeed has been done for basically all genres, to my understanding, or to my knowledge. RPG is a very easy thing to add to anything, but that's not the only thing you could do. One of the games I have talked about this weekend, especially, that I would love to see is essentially a combination world building slash RTS slash empire building game. A 4X combined with a good RTS combined with, let me give you another example. The Star Wars game I would pitch if I had infinite money and infinite time. And a parallel universe I could pop into, which had time frozen in it, that I could work on this game forever, or something. I had the powers of the Q. Bam. Okay, here's this game. It would be essentially an FPS space combat sim, RTS in space, with RPG elements and a heavy story focus and a little bit of adventuring in that as well. That's 5 genres right there, and I think that's a good thing. I think that more games need to be trying that kind of thing, rather than just kind of settling into, this is an action game or this is an action-adventure game. And you may say an action-adventure game is cross-genre, but at this point, action-adventure is its own genre. It's not a cross anymore. It's just become too prolific. Moving on, have I ever checked out Initial D? And if so, what did I think of it? For those of you who don't know, Initial D is to summarize drastically, a car anime. And yes, I have checked it out. A friend of mine recommended it because he was very much into cars. He liked it. He also liked the tennis anime, whose name I can't think of right now. Champion of the World, something like that. I can't remember it. Anyways, I didn't get into it. I didn't have anything against it. It wasn't an anime I actually didn't dislike, or a show, I guess I should say, that I actually disliked. I'm sorry, it's actually a manga, to be completely honest with you. I shouldn't call it an anime. I apologize. Point being, I didn't get into it. Not my thing. I apologize, but I just don't have anything else to say there. Have I played Jade Empire, and what did I think of it? Yes, I have played Jade Empire, and I liked the concept of the idea that they were doing the moral choice system, which at that point was still kind of on the high rise and still being used a lot, without it being good versus evil. It was intended to be the two actual philosophies of the closed fist and the open palm, and which I may be saying incorrectly. And I liked that concept. Jade Empire itself was, how do I put this? Probably the most not amazing game I've ever seen them punch out. And I know that sounds weird because most of their other games are amazing and incredible and wonderful. Jade Empire was just kind of there. It felt like an experiment that didn't quite succeed, but it didn't actually fail. It was just there. I do recommend Jade Empire to anyone who can get it on the cheap, get it on sale or on Steam or whatnot. Just not something that I would call one of the ups, and it's probably a game I have no real intention of replaying again. I played through it twice, and I'm good. I still wouldn't call it a popcorn game though, and I feel like defending this game a little because it wasn't that level. It was just, I don't know. It didn't catch me. It never actually gripped me. It never really pulled me in. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it. Let's move on. Now this is a lengthy question that basically is asking why BioWare defaulted the original Citadel Council as being replaced with the All-Human Council if you didn't do the save transfer or if you didn't do the little comic at the beginning of Mass Effect 2. He was wondering why Karpyshyn's novels make mention that the Alliance did not save the Destiny's Ascension. The reason being is that for the path that they were looking for, the generic plot line, that someone had to sit down, and Karpyshyn sat down and said, okay, we need to make up a default plot line for all the people who don't transfer. And the idea was very much the Babylon 5 thing, to be completely honest with you. Humanity coming in and taking over and establishing dominance, President Clark, that whole thing, and generally expanding in a way that they probably shouldn't have, and being handed the key to Cthulhu's workshop a little bit early. And so, and all of this is conjecture, because I guess the actual answer here to your question is I have no idea. I have no idea why that's the default, especially since I admittedly labored over that decision for a while, for days, before I finally decided. I saved the Destiny Ascension, by the way. But I personally I don't know. I can only guess at the matter as I just have, so let's move on. I might have already answered this already, but why are you doing these videos at work? Yes, I am. I always have been, ever since I started doing this. I've moved out of the knock ever since people started complaining about the noise, so I'm out here in the cube farm, so it's a little quieter out here, and I have a little bit more space to stretch out and be like, whoa, and do this thing. Not that I do that a lot, but, I like having the option of being whoa whenever I want to. I was wondering if you had any thoughts. This was asked like 3 times. Do I have any thoughts about the upcoming game Neverwinter, the MMO, and if I've had any thoughts about the player-generated content? I cannot say this kindly, so I'm going to say this as neutrally as I can. I have seen nothing about the new the new Neverwinter MMO game, whatever you want to call it, that looks promising. Nothing I have seen has made me think, ooh, I want to try that. Quite the contrary, actually. And I am probably still going to give it a shot, just out of a degree of loyalty and curiosity, really. But I have no hopes for that one. I have no real aspirations for that one to be a good one. I'd love to be proven wrong, though, and I admit that freely. I really would prefer to be proven wrong. It's just doesn't look that interesting so far. Now, the player-generated content thing, that's always a double-edged sword. But it has been proven time and time again that while that will generate a lot of stuff, I hesitate to use an unkind word here, that is terrible and that you have to sift through, there are going to be gems in that, because player-generated content can generate good stuff. Little Big Planet is an excellent example here. All the Little Big Planets, you have to sift through so many terrible, awful, horrible levels, but you do find genuinely good stuff. You do find genuinely interesting and genuinely enjoyable levels, and so it is overall, in my opinion, a good thing. And we'll see. I'm taking this kind of as a separate here because I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Let's move on to the next question. Any chance the high-definition trilogy on Dex and Daxter will make me reconsider? And any chance I've heard of their cousin games, the Ratchet and Clank series? I have, of course, heard of Ratchet and Clank, another series that I've never actually played. I've never actually played those at all. I've never even picked them up. I don't know why. It never really struck me as something that leapt out at me, if that makes any sense. An HD remake of the trilogy, I will admit, as I've said before, I generally don't like HD remakes, but I do acknowledge that they have a purpose, and that purpose, in this case, actually applies to me, someone who never picked up the series when it was new. And, Hey, now you can buy it for your whatever. I don't actually know. I would imagine it's on the PS3, possibly it's on the Xbox, maybe it's on the PC, I have no idea. But the possibility exists. And now, if money and time weren't issues, I probably would actually pick up that HD trilogy. So I suppose that is a good thing in their favor. I don't know. Shrug. Um, Next question, excuse me. In an end of the world scenario, what would you do both short and long term? Now, let's be completely honest here. We need to define end of the world really quick. So I don't want to go into this too long because I could debate this for a long time. But let's assume just your standard Fallout scenario, right? Fallout, the games, I mean. Fallout, let's say the bombs fall and I'm one of the survivors and I happen to be one of the people who helps walk out early on and try to reestablish society. Now, what I would do is something that would almost guaranteed get me killed, but I would do it anyways because it would be worth it to me. I would try to help people. I would try to share. I would try to aid. I would try to help. I would try to give. And I would get killed for it eventually or immediately. Somewhere along the line, I would encounter someone who would take advantage of me or murder me in my sleep for my caps or whatever. But that is what I would try to do in the short term. In the long term, obviously, I wouldn't have many plans. But one of the things I would very much want to do is to start, for example, if libraries were lost, if information was lost from computers, I would try to find a way to restore that or simply start writing down, here's what happened and try and get an accounting of our history so that future generations can know and so that that information exists. And I would try to do that as neutrally and as unbiasedly as I'm capable of doing so that that knowledge will exist for future generations, and I'll try to preserve that and get that into the future. And like I said, I could keep going and going and going, but let's just stop there. Next question. Did I ever watch Lost, the TV show, and will I do a video on it? I did watch Lost a little bit. I actually am one of the really few people in the entire world who did not enjoy Lost. I didn't disenjoy it. It wasn't a show that I disliked, like, say, reality television, as I mentioned earlier this weekend. But Lost, I just watched that and I was like, okay. It never caught me. It never was interesting. It never was fascinating. The mysteries on the show always felt a little bit arbitrary, and it also probably doesn't help that the last episode was. Yeah. Anyways, was Lost. What an appropriate title. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to rag on the show. I'm really not. It never caught me. It was never my type of mystery. It was never my type of intrigue, and I never got into it. And so I obviously will not be doing a video on it because I couldn't. I don't know enough about the show. Next question. Any chance of doing a video or videos for different games that would cover the mods you would recommend? I'm not sure I'd do that. I understand what you're going with. I've seen people who do videos that cover mods, just individual mods that they recommend. That involves a level of having the ability to have, say, fraps going or whatever, and talking while I'm playing, and editing and video editing, and a bunch of other things that are probably not going to happen with the kind of free time I have available, to be completely honest with you. But I'm not opposed to the idea. I like the concept of the idea. If I win the lottery next Wednesday, I might start doing that because that would be interesting to me. And maybe, several of the other playing while talking ideas that have been tossed at me over the last few months, such as playing StarCraft 2 while talking, or Diablo 3, or whatever. I didn't mean to mention two Blizzard games, but those are two games that have been suggested to me to play while talking towards. I mean, Civ 5 was another one. Let me just give you an example there. Um, have I ever played Republic Commando? Yes, I have. If so, what did you think of the game, and do you think a sequel could and should have been made? And the gentleman mentioned that he thought there was real series potential there, and I agree. I think that whole era had a lot of growth room, had a lot of movement room, and had a lot of potential for games, for TV shows, for books, for video games, for movies. And I think that so much more could have been done with that. I really do wish there had been a Republic Commando series. I liked that game a lot, actually, a lot more than I thought I would, because the last FPS I enjoyed of that variety was way back in Dark Forces and Jedi Knight Academy, which is pretty old at this point. So it was nice to see a return to that, and it's a shame they haven't done anything more with it. Maybe they will. Who knows? Hopefully they won't do Force Unleashed 3 instead. um, Next question. Do you like the first, second, and third Star Wars movies? That would be the prequels, and the fourth Indiana Jones movie, and do you think should have made? Now, I've commented on these briefly in the past, but let's be... this is going to sound like a cop-out. Yes and no. Not in response to the questions. Yes and no to the first question, and yes and no to the second question. So I suppose both. The prequel movies had the potential to be amazing. They really did. And I have said before, if you made three small edits, I think it's three. I've debated this at length, of course, because I'm a giant geek and so are my friends, how you could improve the prequels and how you could have improved Indiana Jones 4. And it would not require big sweeping changes. It would require just this change and this change and this change. Bam. Episode 1, amazingness. Okay, let's change here, and let's add this to episode 2. Bam, amazing. You could have done that. They could have done that. So there's a lot of wasted potential there. And the CGI oversaturation is ridiculous, as I've discussed before. It was one of the things that really choked the life out of those movies. And I'm sorry, George Lucas, but you don't know how to write romance. There's no shame in that. And I admit that there is no shame in that. What there is shame is trying to pretend you know how to write romance when you don't. Just admit it. But anyways, point I'm getting to here is that I did enjoy the prequels. I really did. I did enjoy them. I did enjoy watching them. I own them, and I do rewatch them every now and again. But they are so far down below the original trilogy that it's not even funny, and I think there's a lot of potential that was wasted there. But so I do think they should have been made to an extent. I wish they had been made better. And everything I just said applies exactly to Indiana Jones 4. I enjoyed Indiana Jones 4. I thought it was fun. I thought it was interesting. I thought it was laughable. It was ridiculous and it was kind of silly, but it did. And honestly, there's actually only one thing I would have changed of Indiana Jones 4. Not the aliens, not the nuclear blast thing. No, all of that I could have gone with. It was all in the spirit of things. I would have just ejected the kid. Just removed him from the plot in his entirety. I can't even think of the actor's name. Just gong, goodbye, and he's gone. All right, and then just continue the rest of the plot as if he never existed. I think that would have been much better. But let's move on. I'm almost at the end here. What do you think is more important, fun combat or good writing? Good writing, hands down. But I will admit that I will play a game that has excellent of one and bad in the other for the one that is good. I like to use Final Fantasy Tactics as my example of a game that had, in my opinion, horrendous gameplay, horrendous mechanics, horrendous UI, just a pain to play, a chore to play. But I played that game and I have replayed that game because the story is amazing. It's arguably one of the best stories. It didn't had the heavy, amazing characterization of Dragon Age or Mass Effect 2 or I don't know, Final Fantasy 6, but it did have a magnificent story. One of the most well-written stories I've ever enjoyed in any medium whatsoever, ever. And I thought it was a work of art, and so I put up with the gameplay for that. By contrast, a game, this is kind of an extreme example, but all of the Mario Karts, which have no story and no writing, nonetheless are extremely enjoyable because the gameplay, the combat, if in this case, is fantastic. And if we were to use the example of, say, well, I don't know, let me think about that one for a moment. Um, Actually, I can't come up with an example of a game that specifically has combat that is very fun, that is terrible writing that I played for, but I'm willing to swing both ways, but I will take good writing over good combat any day of the week. I will deal with a bad game that has great story much easier than I will deal with a great game that has terrible story. You know what? I got it. Just Cause 2. Boom, right there. Just Cause 2 has amazing combat and is a very fun game and a very enjoyable game. Arguably my favorite sandbox game ever made, with the exception of Spore, but they're two different kinds of sandbox. And the story is tripe and terrible and awful, and the voice acting is just hokey as all get out, and it's one of those so bad it's good things. But that's an example of the opposite that I would go for. So there you go. Do I think that MMO subscription model should be changed from a monthly fee towards an hourly fee? The reason I'm asking is I have several MMOs, Rift, Tor, and EVE Online, but when I pay $15 for 30 days, I usually play less than 10 days total in that month. Now, I actually misread this question when I first read it. I thought he was talking about what one of my friends is saying is how MMOs shouldn't be doing the subscription model at all. But as opposed to going down to hourly, I genuinely hope they don't do that, because what will happen if they go to hourly model is they will charge more equivalently, if you follow me. The people who play more will be paying a lot more money for the month than the people who play the less. Now, there are advantages to that, and it is worth saying that you could have a system where you do both. But anytime when you have a system where you do both, the only reason to have both systems in place is for the people who don't play for the full month's worth, and thus would probably be paying for less in overall terms across the month for the hours they do play, which means the gaming company would be losing money on the matter, and they will probably not implement that. Whether or not I think that's a good idea is a much more debatable policy, but I will say personally, I have always been in favor of subscription fees. I shouldn't say I'm in favor, but I get it, and it doesn't bother me. I admit that's just my situation and my circumstance, but the way I've always looked at it is $15 for 30 days of whenever and however and whatever. $15 is like 2 days worth of food, if you follow me. Actually, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get the point. That's a piddling amount of money. And yeah, you could say, yeah, it adds up over years. Yes, it does, but the money I am making also adds up over the years. You have to look at it on a paycheck basis. Now, if you don't have a paycheck, yes, I'm with you, I understand. But for someone who does, what that amounts to is $7.50 a paycheck, which is nothing to me. Which is so small amount of money for the amount of entertainment I can get from an MMO. The only problem keeping me from enjoying an MMO is time, which I suppose is the same kind of problem. But even then, even if I only play a few hours, that 750 per paycheck costs me less than it would to go to see a movie or whatnot, or go out to a nice dinner for 2 weeks of whenever I had free time to enjoy myself. So it's an interesting idea in concept, and if it was executed properly, it would be great. But I hope it isn't, because it won't be executed properly. People will execute that in order to try and bilk more money out of the customers, basically. So, final question. It's a really simple one. Have you ever had any supernatural or abnormal experiences? Well, there was an EA game I really liked the other day. No, I have not. I know what you're asking, and no, I haven't. So, I'm now caught up on the Q&As, except I probably have 20 more questions in the time I've been recording this, because that usually is how this goes. I am going to, unfortunately, it looks like I do not have time like I was hoping for tonight in order to do what I was going to do tonight. But I do hope to get to that tomorrow. So I will see you guys tomorrow.